Firstly, welcome and thank you for joining us. As you might know, the Islamic Museum of Australia has a lot of focus and a gallery dedicated to the Australian Muslim history here in Australia. And one of the most important parts of that history is the Indigenous connection, Muslim connection. And we're about documenting and preserving that history to showcase to the rest of Australia that important timeline. So, Aunty Halima, you have a fascinating background. Please, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, your parents and grandparents?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's a long yarn. It goes back, yes. Well, my grandfather, as you know, he came from Singapore settlement. And in those days, they had the schooners. So we're talking about the change of all the ships. So it was a schooner in those days. So that was back in the 1800s. He came from Singapore settlement. He came to the Torres Strait, and then he met my grandmother. So she walked around with no shoes, believe it or not. No shoes at all on the hard stones of TI, Thursday Island, the Torres Strait. And I remember her, a beautiful woman, stately woman. She would have been about 6 foot.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, they met, married, and they had about 11 children. So we are from the OAM family. So we're Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander. And then we found out just recently we're also Aborigines. So that comes in from the 7 rivers of Cape York. So that's the connection of the Aborigines. Great-grandmother, her name was Panipan, meaning lightning. And then she married, her husband was Sagul, and means wanting to play around. So there you go. So that's a connection. But we grew up knowing, and we're very proud to know that who we are and where we come from.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yes.
And your grandfather used to fish for sea cucumbers, and that's how you met your grandmother?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, yes.
And so your mother was born Muslim.
Yes.
And then she met your father.
Yeah, my father came from Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia today.
Yes, that's another incredible story. It's like that lineage continues, even though from your grandmother and grandfather to your mother and father.
Yeah, so the Dutch, they went to Indonesia, and of course some sad stories there, but anyway, that's how it was in those days. But we were segregated growing up. We were quarter caste, half caste, 3/4 caste. That's how we were. That's how we were under the protectorate. So that's how we grew up. We were like apartheid was up in the Torres Strait, also part of Queensland. There were a picture theatre, and upstairs was for whites, downstairs was the coloured and the blacks. So my brothers and his friends, they would climb up and sit in the mango trees to watch the open air theatre, so to speak. Yes.
If there's a will, there's a way, isn't there?
Yeah, that's true. And for the toilets, it's more or less the same. One for the whites and one for the blacks. And the same with the hospitals. It was all segregation. But we can still feel it, it has happened. It's still happening anyway with discrimination.
Racism, has become such an issue, and we've been doing everything we can, and the museum really is about how do we educate the Australian Muslim history, the connection Muslims had with the Indigenous community pre-European settlement, where they traded harmoniously and there was no such problems or issues that came about, and why can't we do that now? From what I understand, and I'd love to hear more about it, it seems like it's a common thing in in Thursday Island, where you have mixed intercultural marriages between locals, Malays, Indonesians. I've also heard of Japanese and Filipinos. Is that?
Oh, yes, that's correct. We have Japanese up there. Yes, my cousin actually married Japanese. So, yes, and the Filipinos as well. So they were all the pearl divers up there.
So tell us a little bit about Thursday Island. So what happens? Do you have a mosque for Muslims and during Ramadan?
No, there's nothing at all. There was just Bahuddin Ross and his wife June, my family friend. They held prayers at their home, and also prayers was held at our house at one time. And so more or less the Muslims up there have now intermarried, and so there's only 2 or 3 of us still, you can say, Muslims. Everyone else is left this time, more or less. But they still know some of the prayers. They've heard the prayers, and that they keep the Muslim names alive in the families. So that's how it is, which is very, very sad.
Your father was a pearl diver.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that industry. Was it dangerous? You must have set off for long journeys.
Oh, yes, it was very dangerous because sometimes the divers, they go 60 fathoms deep. Wow. And my brother, who has since passed, his name was Abdul Karim, he actually left me. He wrote like a sort of a diary of his journey, he was the first Indigenous engineer in the Torres Strait. So I have that on paper, pen to paper. He goes back to the 1950s. So all the pearling luggers that he worked on. My brother, Uncle Omar, he's 82 this year, 82, yes. So they found a sabre. It was written in Arabic. So he feels that the Arabs were there at one time because they found it, and it was in the sea. At low tide, they discovered it.
I believe your husband was also the first Lebanese Muslim on Thursday Island?
Yeah, he was.
Wow. Yes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he came from Melbourne, came up looking for work sort of thing. So he came up to teach Islam. So, he was the first Lebanese.
That is incredible. So, and how does he feel living up in Thursday when he got up there and versus coming from Melbourne?
Well, it was very hot. He couldn't stand the heat more than anything.
Yes. I lived in Dubai for 7 years for work, and when I visited the Arnhem Land, it just brought me back to the same weather that we experienced for about 9 months of the year over there.
Yes, it was too hot for him.
What about celebrating culture and passing on culture to sort of younger generations? You have children and grandchildren, particularly your grandchildren. Are they interested in that rich family history? Are they more drawn to one culture than the other? How have you navigated that?
Well, I've told them stories as growing up. So in 2019, Mohammed and I took them back to the Torres Strait, to Thursday Island. So the girls, they sort of knew how I grew up. So they asked me about, for instance, it's dreadful, but where was our wash house, which is now, you say, the bathroom today? You know, things like that, things of yesteryears, you know, the thunderbox toilet, what that we used to have, you know, and now you have a toilet today. You don't have to carry buckets of water and things like that. So there was a hardship growing up, but we grew up in a beautiful, I don't know, it was beautiful growing up as we were, how we grew up. That's how I remember Thursday Island. So I sort of, I think they loved it when they went back. They were drawn to the stories, the yarn that I told them as the young children, girls growing up. So they loved it. They were fascinated with Thursday Island. So they accepted the culture, and they still accept the culture. Yes, they know, their background as well as being Muslims.
Your story, we want it to last a lifetime, and we want to share that journey. We want to share that history within the museum, and definitely we'll still come down, and we'd love to see where you grew up and how you grew up, and and document that, and hopefully we can pass it on to generations so they learn, they see the hardships and learn from those hardships, and the good times as well, and
Yes.
and how sort of Islam came to your life, and hopefully improved it and made it better. But I'm going to leave it with one last question, if that's okay. What advice or message would you like to give to the younger generation out there, whether Indigenous, Muslim, but Australians? What message would you like to leave?
Getting to know each other, I think. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in nation and tribes to come to know one another. And I think that's wonderful. And I think invite people into your homes. It's another way of getting to know each other, over a cup of tea, have a yarn.